From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. This week took no time at all in getting started. Monday, right out of the gate, the lines in the airports because of the TSA shortages, and ICE shows up. While we're at the airport, of course, the horrible story from LaGuardia and the Air Canada plane that collided with a fire truck on the runway as it was landing. And then also to start out the week, more ridiculous lies from the Orange Menace. But I woke up on Monday morning happy because it was International Atheist Day, observed annually on March 23rd to promote awareness of secular perspectives, encourage atheists to safely come out, and celebrate reason and logic. International Atheist Day aims to foster solidarity, support free thought, and advocate for the separation of church and state. The first International Atheist Day was celebrated in 2019. So, my fellow atheists, happy International Atheist Day. I encourage you, if you're a closet atheist, it's really important that we come out of the closet. I don't think there's a single open atheist in all of Congress. I could be wrong. I may have to check. Let me know if I'm wrong about that. The SAVE Act, which is the Voter Suppression Act, we've talked about it, and we've been a little bit dismissive because it didn't have the votes in the Republican Senate. But it's back in play, and the pressure is mounting. It's back in play because for a while it got tied up with the TSA funding, and now Majority Leader Thune has suggested some ideas on how they could move forward. And they could drop it for now, untie it from the TSA funding, which is also moving rapidly. That could be solved by the time you hear this podcast. But then they would return to the SAVE Act afterwards, and they're floating the idea of making it part of a Reconciliation Act. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but as you know, the reconciliation process does away with the filibuster. That was the whole reason the SAVE Act looked impossible. They couldn't get 60 votes. But under reconciliation, you only need a simple majority, 50 plus 1. The vice president casting the deciding vote if necessary. Now, reconciliation bills have to be budget-related in some way. They can finagle their way into that, I guess. But the point is, it's back on the table. And we should all be very, very concerned. And you need to contact your legislators, because what they're doing is suppressing the vote. Literally hundreds of millions of people will be in trouble. Every one of us, every Sam and Diane one of us, according to some proposals, will have to re-register. It's like getting fired from your job and having to reapply. Yeah, this is how serious it is. Every one of us basically would lose our voter registration, and we'd have to reapply and prove our citizenship. And we've been through the whole thing, especially married women whose birth certificate names don't match their current names on their driver's license. You got to have a passport, pay for that. You got to find a birth certificate, a real one. It's got to be official. It's got to have the embossed stamp on it. If a married woman changed her name, she's got to find the official marriage certificate, not just the little souvenir one they put in your memory book. It's a big old mess. The SAVE Act is central to the fascist agenda. That's just plain and simple what it is. One-party rule. That's what they're trying to achieve. Because once you make people jump through all these hoops, then it's totally in the hands of bureaucrats. They know who you are. What do you think the dodgy boys were doing? What do you think Palantir is doing? All of this data collection that they're doing, the surveillance. They know exactly who you are. So a corrupt fascist official can look you in the eye, knowing exactly who you are, make you jump through hoops, ultimately deny your vote. They look at another person's eyes, they know exactly who they are, they know they're going to vote the right way, so they make things easy for them. Do you think I exaggerate? Do you have eyes and ears? Do you see what's happening out there? Yeah, it's not just the conditions of the SAVE Act itself. It's how corrupt officials can use and abuse the law. They are after a one-party state. They are after your vote. They want you disenfranchised. They want a permanent, forever, one-party fascist state. Do I exaggerate? No, I do not. The SAVE Act must not pass. All right, the airlines. This airplane truck crash in LaGuardia, just awful. Both pilots dead, 40 plus passengers sent to hospital. Just so sad. I wouldn't dream of speculating on why this happened. Here's what I do know. Okay, this is how I operate. I don't pretend to know things. But here's what I know. We fly too much. Americans fly too much. And it's a very small percentage of Americans. I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but we talked about this, a couple of months ago. Most Americans, a majority of Americans, never fly, ever. It's expensive. People who work paycheck to paycheck and can't get ahead and are in debt, and that describes most Americans. I mean, there's 340 million of us? Yeah, a couple million out of that 340 are doing all the flying. Jet setters, rich people who treat airlines like an Uber. They're just jumping on planes all the time. Hell, the Orange Menace flies to Florida every single goddamn weekend. And a great percentage of people flying around every day are business flights. So it's a waste of money. It's a waste of energy. It's horrible for the Earth. It's horrible for the climate crisis. We should be flying a tiny fraction of the miles we're flying right now. You know, if you and the kids want to fly from California to Wisconsin to visit Grandma, great, fine, wonderful, do it. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm not saying we should have no such thing as airlines. But the jet setters and the business class and all of that, the joyriding, nah. Compared to its costs, both in money and in these occasional horrible incidents, which I know are rare. Of course I know that. The air traffic controller, one of them, was quoted as saying, "I messed up." He felt terrible, blaming himself. But from early reports we're getting here, the incident cannot be blamed on human error alone. There were 2 people in the air traffic control tower. That seems low, but we're told that's standard procedure. Fatigue can be an issue. This was late at night. So regardless of what they say about standard procedure, 2 seems awfully low, especially considering the fact there was an emergency happening right before this terrible crash. There were fumes of some sort on another plane, and people were falling ill. That's where the fire truck was headed, to evacuate that plane. So there's already one emergency happening, and it absolutely played into this horrible incident. On top of that, we find out now that vehicles on the tarmac, including this fire truck, were not equipped with the necessary tracking technology. They got this system where you're supposed to have sensors, and there's an automatic warning system if vehicles or planes are in proximity to each other. Well, now we learn the system doesn't always work perfectly, and that vehicles are not even required to have these transponders, these tracking devices. It's recommended by the FAA, but it's not required. And you know where I'm going with this. Of course I am. Every story goes back to the same problem. Money. Budgets. Cutting corners. In a proper social anarchist world that's not run by profit and money, where people can work at jobs of their choosing and have rights as workers, and they're not exploited by systems, we would have our priorities straight. Safety first would be more than a slogan, because there would be no financial incentives to override safety first. If the world worked properly, air traffic controllers would be working in that tower because they wanted to. They would not be forced into long hours and be understaffed. In a world where workers have the power, rather than owners, rather than political so-called leaders, these problems don't exist. Would there still be human error occasionally? Of course, because there are still humans. But any problem caused by budget restraints, any problem caused by workers not having their rights and safety prioritized, those problems all go away. So I'm not getting ahead of myself on the details of this particular incident. It's tragic, and I don't want to do that. But I am saying that if the world worked the way it ought to, the chances of something like this happening would be a tiny fraction of what they are now. And then the other thing that got the week started, The Orange Menace announces what's supposed to be some great, colossal breaking news. I've called a ceasefire in Iran and we're having negotiations. He just lies. All he does is lie. Iran denied that there were any talks. Israel doesn't know what he's talking about. But the media listens to him and they continue to report his lies. And even worse, the markets listen to him, the people who trade. And there's some speculation that that was the whole point. That's why he did it, to try to manipulate the markets, to manipulate oil prices. And damned if that didn't work, at least for a day. And I loved Iran's response. It's like, what? We speculated about this earlier, and other people have as well. What if he really tries to end the war that he started? And Iran just says, no, you know what? You started it. We'll decide when it's over. I mean, that's a pretty interesting speculation because I could see that happening. Iran just not letting him out. Hey, you started this. We're not going to let you leave. We're going to keep tossing missiles over Israel, drones over the Gulf states, keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. Come and get us. What the hell is he going to do then? Oh, Jesus, Lord mercy. Yeah, as a proud atheist, I take full advantage of religious exclamations. It's become a habit of mine over the years. I find them very effective, and more than that, just very satisfying. Jesus, Mother, Mary, and Joseph. Another important story this week, the court ruling Meta ordered to pay $375 million in civil penalties. The court found that they misled consumers about the safety of its platforms and enabled harm, including child sexual exploitation against its users. Meta executives knew their products harmed children, disregarded warnings from their own employees, and lied to the public. So after a lot of attempts, finally a jury trial has found Meta liable for something. Now, this is good news, of course. I don't know how far it gets us. I'm not sure how much $375 million means to Mark Zuckerberg. What we have to do is nationalize these companies. Nationalize the entire internet, for that matter. The physical world and the digital world must have equal consideration under the law. We inhabit both worlds every day. So whether in the physical world or the digital world, we should all have a reasonable expectation for privacy. We have the right to be protected from violence and abuse when inhabiting either world. So a court fine, all right. More regulation, I suppose. But ultimately that's no solution. It only perpetuates the ongoing arms race. Zuckerberg and the rest of them just say, well, okay, you fine us, you regulate us, we'll find ways to get around those regulations. And especially in this world of AI and the daily advancement of technology, yeah, it's just an arms race that we the people will never win. Water finds its level, profit finds its level, social media, and the entire internet for that matter, must be nationalized as public utilities to end this nonsense once and for all. Israel has now announced its intentions regarding southern Lebanon. And talk about the same old story. Everything we accuse Israel of doing, eventually they just say it out loud. Yep, you're right, that's what we're doing. They're going to occupy southern Lebanon, what they call a defensive buffer, a full 20 miles north of the current Israeli border, from the Litani River to the Mediterranean Sea. So, from the river to the sea, as some might say. Netanyahu and the entire Israeli government right now, a rogue terrorist state, with every intention of continuing their Greater Israel project, expansionism. Another story I want you to appreciate for what it is, and that's the lawsuit in Minnesota. The state is suing the Orange regime for access to investigation materials regarding the killings of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. So this is important. Local and state investigators, as you know, have been stonewalled by the feds. Not allowed evidence. No cooperation from the feds. So, this lawsuit, good news. But again, make no mistake, This is not an isolated story. This is all about the fascist takeover. We're not talking about run-of-the-mill garden variety legalisms, little spats that one agency might have with another agency. No, not at all. Just like the SAVE Act and many of the other stories we're talking about. This is about no less than the future of democracy. They are all chapters in the same book, democracy or fascism. So let's keep an eye on this. It's very important. I feel the need to go back, follow up on what we were talking about a couple days ago. That's some media criticism and some thoughts on media literacy. Thomas Jefferson's famous quote, "A well-informed citizenry is the best defense against tyranny." And I'm very worried about the media landscape, the news journalism landscape, and how we're interacting with it. Really very worried. Because, yes, legacy media is dying. And by legacy media, generally, it's just kind of an updated term for mainstream media. New York Times, Washington Post, the broadcast networks, the big cable guys. Radio, TV, and print. And you know what? If that's the way it's going to be, fine. But as this evolution happens, we cannot accept the death of journalism itself. We still need people doing the work. And let's be clear on what a journalist is. Because most of the people inhabiting the digital landscape are not journalists. A journalist is a professional. They've been trained. They cultivate their sources. They talk to their sources. Dozens, hundreds of them. They work the phone. They walk a beat. They drive. They fly to where the news is happening. They interview people in those places. They get second and third sources to corroborate facts. They fact check. Remember All the President's Men? Go back and watch the movie. It's a good lesson on journalism. They do research. They'll spend weeks, months, years on a single story. That's what a journalist is. And it's why the economic model just doesn't work anymore. So-called legacy, television, radio, print, just doesn't work. They can't afford it. It's economically impossible to do the work I've just described. Now, of course it still happens. Of course it does. But we all know that local news has been decimated to almost nothing. I know on a state level that print and broadcast journalists assigned to cover state government, those numbers have dwindled, all because of economics. Having correspondents around the globe, a fraction of what we used to have. So it just doesn't work economically anymore. And this is all very much evolving. It's a dynamic situation right now. I was inspired to follow up on this after just a couple days because Bill Maher got under my skin again with the most inane commentary on his most recent program. And then right on the heels of that, I saw a meme about Heather Cox Richardson. In fact, here, I'll read it to you. It's a picture of her with a caption underneath that says, "A history professor writes about politics every night, and by morning millions have read her work, building a massive audience that rivals major news outlets." Okay, what's your point on this? That's true, of course. And as good as Richardson is, I do think she's pretty good. But she's not a journalist. That's my point. If her audience rivals major news outlets, then we're in trouble. Because she's not a journalist. She seems to be a fine historian. I'm not going to judge her on those terms. She curates news, which is good, which is a big part of what these people do. The digital folks, the so-called content creators. I mean, I do that myself. I curate news. I choose which stories I want to talk about. So she's a curator. Fine. Good. There's nothing bad about these things, but she's not a journalist, and we need journalists. The people in the digital landscape spend most of their time talking to each other. David Pakman will talk to Brian Cohen, and Jim Acosta will talk to Heather Cox Richardson, and then Heather Cox Richardson talks to Jon Stewart. And I mean, they're all just guests on each other's shows. None of them are doing any reporting, any journalism. This is the point that's lost. We need journalists. All these content creators, where do you think they're getting their news? From legacy media, from actual journalists. So don't give me all this hype about how legacy media is dying and that's a good thing. They have all the actual journalists. I just can't stress this enough because everybody's getting this wrong. Everybody is getting this analysis wrong. Let me take a little side trip just for a second. I want to hit you with an analogy. I've mentioned several times on this program the work of Michael Pollan, especially his earlier work of a couple decades ago when he was writing exclusively about food. And he had a rule that you may have heard. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Easy to remember. And by eat food, he meant actual food, not the ultra-processed, high-sugar garbage. Fruits and vegetables and dairy, not stuff that comes in cans and packages and been processed to within an inch of its life. Now, the high-sugar and ultra-processed food, a few bites aren't going to kill you, but if you try to live on them, they will literally kill you. So, the not too much, that's pretty obvious. Not too much, it'll make you unhealthy. And mostly plants. Meat and dairy are fine in moderation. Cupcakes on your birthday, knock yourself out. But mostly plants. So it's a very good, pithy piece of advice. I want to steal that from Michael Pollan and adapt it for our purposes here. Talking about healthy news consumption, about being an informed citizen. Here's my advice. Get the news. Not too much. Mostly read. So, when I say get the news, I mean actual news from actual journalists. When I say not too much, that simply means not too much. Otherwise, it'll make you crazy. You got to be a person. You got to be out in the world. You got to have hobbies. You got to have nature. So get the news. Not too much. Mostly read. Some watching and listening, videos, podcasts. It's fine. In moderation. You don't want that to be your whole diet. You have to mostly read. And then to complete this analogy, most digital content creators are only interested in creating clickbait. That's your high sugar and ultra processed food. Have it on your birthday, but it can't be part of your regular diet. So get the news, not too much, mostly read. Now, as we transition away from broadcast and print, nothing's going to stop that, I understand. You have to find actual journalists, reporters in the digital landscape. And there are some, as it stands now, and as I've said, a fraction of what legacy still controls. That's still where a great majority of the journalism is coming from. And then the digital folks curate from there. But there's some actual, original, on-the-ground, primary source reporting from people like Matt Taibbi, Glenn Greenwald, Jeremy Scahill at The Intercept. I gave some recommendations the other day if you want to go back and listen to that program. I think we mentioned ProPublica, excellent nonprofit, original investigative reporting. So it's definitely out there. It's not going to jump right out at you and bite you on the nose. You got to go find it. Because it's competing with tons of digital junk food. And it's a mix. Most independent commentators, as I mentioned a second ago, are curators. Most curators still get most of their news from legacy media. So it's not dead yet, not even close. But there is independent news. Got to find it. The alternate system is being built right under our feet. It's growing. That's great. And there's lots of kind of hybrids as this thing develops. There is some actual news reporting. They do a lot of interviews with newsmakers. Some on-the-ground reporting, as I've described it. Mehdi Hassan at Zateo. The Bulwark. Midas Touch. You read their stuff, and it'll say things like, according to reports, or, they're pretty good about naming their sources. New York Times reports, the Washington Post reporting, NBC News reports. Yeah, they're curators. Some are better than others. The mix between commentary and secondary reporting varies depending on who you're listening to. The co-hosts of iHip, the I've Had It podcast, they're pretty heavy on the opinion. Crooked Media, that's the Pod Save guys. They lean a little more toward the actual news. I don't know. Everybody's a little different. And this is also very important to understand. Just about everybody I'm talking about is still operating on the profit system. That's why some of these podcasts will open with 2-3 minutes even. I've heard 3 minutes of ads preceding the first hello, welcome to the show. And then 10 minutes later, they break for another 2 or 3 minutes. So they still have to please advertisers. That's why they're still married to clickbait strategies. There's still got to be pressure to comply. There's outright pay-to-play pressure, as we talked about the other day, where those with an agenda will pay cash to the influencer or podcaster to present their agenda. So look for the nonprofits. So it's a developing ecosystem. I encourage you to be a part of it. But don't think for a minute that legacy media is dead. It still absolutely dominates what most people know. And do not mistake people like me for professional journalists. I curate. I offer opinion. So judge me. Judge all of us. Be critical. Keep all of us accountable. You can be entertained by the comics. I am. Fine. Even Bill Maher, who I need to mention here again, who just drives me crazy with his opinions. But man, he's got a good writing room. He really does. He's got good writers. So, Bill Maher. He's an excellent example of someone who just gets entirely out of their lane. He's always talking about things for which he has no experience, no education. He keeps making horrible mistakes of reason and logic. I catch him all the time. And this most recent commentary, it was all about this topic. It was all about legacy media dying. And his analysis was entirely wrong. First, he totally ignored the fact that I tried to point out, that the alternate system has a minuscule footprint on primary source reporting compared to legacy media. That all or most of the content creators are commenting on mostly mainstream media news. That's still where the news is coming from. The second thing he got wrong was that he was okay with nobody knowing the news. Oh, they're busy with their own lives. They have kids. And all they want to know is the latest score of the ball game. And he was so cynical about it, as though that's just the way the world is, and he was just fine with that. And as though that's not a terrible problem. It is a terrible problem. A well-informed citizenry is the best defense against tyranny. And Bill Maher, in his snarky, cynical attitude, seems to have given up on that. Alternate nonprofit digital news media, actual news journalism, is on the rise. That's great. But it is still in its infancy. You and I have to help it grow because we need journalists, real journalists. Without legitimate first-person primary source reporting, this nation is done for. All right. This and all episodes can be heard at the website, charlespurcell.com, or on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio in Milwaukee. Find us on Blue Sky and Substack. Peter Donalds wrote and performed our theme song. All right, I love you. I'll see you out there.